significance of this first summit is that it is happening at all.
It's also the kind of music that's all over the internet in MP3 format.
There are also healthcare workers and civil servants here angry about budget cuts and worried about their jobs.
Organizers of today's protests say it's obvious Harris hasn't gotten the message.
Chill, freezing genetically modified foods out of Europe could be setting in.
The land giveaway
here.
grows. It's become an issue raised at international summits.
Hello, I'm Knowlton Nash. In this edition of News in Review, the startling resignation of Premier Lucien Bouchard of Quebec, the man many people thought could have led his province out of Canada. In Labrador, more shocking cases of Innu children sniffing gas and getting high on the toxic fumes. The Supreme Court of Canada brings down its decision in the Little Sisters book case, setting new regulations on how Canada Customs decides what is obscene and may not be brought into the country. And in Newfoundland, the economy is hot, jobs are available, and this may be the year that the province leads Canada in economic growth. We go behind the rosy statistics and predictions to look at the new Newfoundland. Lucien Bouchard ruled a province and threatened a nation. The Quebec Premier was one of the most potent voices for his province's sovereignty. He earned the respect of his allies and even many of his enemies. But on a day in January of 2001, he decided he had had enough. He was getting out of politics. Word first spread by rumor, and then Bouchard confirmed it.
It is now time for my involvement in politics to come to an end. I will leave my duties as Prime Minister of Quebec.
It was a stunning and bitter end to Bouchard's political career. He was leaving a very popular man in Quebec, and many had believed he would be the one who could lead Quebec to independence. So how did it come to this? Well, to understand, it's important to look back on Bouchard's political life, a life that often put him at odds with those around him. From his arrival on the national political scene in 1988, Bouchard had been a force to be reckoned with. Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, Bouchard's old friend from Laval Law School, first appointed Bouchard as ambassador to France, and later in the year brought him back to Canada to serve in the Conservative cabinet.
The Prime Minister told me, we need you in Ottawa. We need you now.
Mulroney needed Bouchard because he needed strong representation from Quebec in his government. Still, it was quite a surprise. Bouchard hadn't even been elected and was picked over dozens of Conservative MPs from Quebec. Even more surprising to many, Bouchard worked for the Yes Committee for Quebec independence in the 1980 referendum. But he said his commitment to Canada was unquestionable.
So I'm a Canadian, I have no problem with that, you know. I'm very proud to be a Canadian.
But eventually, that pride in being Canadian gave way to his belief in Quebec independence. The breaking point was the Meech Lake Accord, a set of constitutional reforms proposed to satisfy Quebec about its status in Canada. And it included that famous term, distinct society. Prime Minister Mulroney and the provincial premiers worked it out in secret conferences in 1987. But later on, some premiers from English Canada and native groups, among others, raised doubts about it. So Mulroney went about making compromises and changes that infuriated Bouchard because he said they betrayed Quebec. And in the end, he quit the Progressive Conservative government and gave hints about his next move.
Quebecers should be united. The problem in 1980 was that Quebec was divided. Now, I have a sense that Quebec is getting more and more united and getting out of ambiguity. So all parties in Quebec should have a coalition, and they should define themselves what should be the path for the future for Quebec. And once we have a consensus on something in Quebec, it's easy to have a mandate to support it from the people. It could be by an election, referendum, you name it. But after that, it is possible for Quebec to be a strong negotiating partner.
Bouchard decided that his own future and his province's lay in the creation of a new party, a party unlike any other Canada had seen before, the Bloc Québécois.
Canada's newest federal political alliance has an unusual distinction. That is, if Lucien Bouchard and his 6 fellow members of the Bloc Québécois achieve their goal, they cease to exist.
We work in Ottawa under the flag of sovereignty of Quebec. Our trust, our goal is not hidden. There is nothing subversive in what we are doing.
They are all disaffected ex-Tories, with the exception of Jean Lapierre, a former Liberal and bitter enemy of Jacques Chrétien. They were galvanized by the failure of the Meech Lake Accord, and they're determined to show English Canada the consequences.
Everyone that thought that it was going to be business as usual the day after, you're in for a big surprise.
Lapierre doesn't agree with the former Tories on every issue, but the Bloc Québécois has nonetheless drawn up a manifesto. In it, the 7 MPs say they consider the Quebec National Assembly to be, in law and in fact, the supreme democratic institution of the Quebec people. And they promise they will demand from the federal government the full share that Quebec is entitled to as a founding partner and major contributor to the Canadian Federation. A federal by-election race is underway in Quebec now, and happily for the Bloc Québécois, it's in the strongly nationalist Montreal riding of Laurier-Saint-Marie. The Bloc Québécois candidate is Gilles Duceppe, a union negotiator and the son of a prominent Quebec comedian. Duceppe already has the support of the provincial Liberals, the Quebec New Democrats, and the Parti Québécois. But federal leaders like Herb Gray question the legitimacy of the Bloc Québécois.
Many Canadians will wonder how they feel they can be here to work for a sovereign Quebec when they are not elected on that basis, and whether it is fair for them to spend taxpayers' money for that purpose.
But the Bloc Québécois has an answer to that. They say that Quebec is still a part of Canada, and denying Quebec nationalists a voice in the federal parliament would be taxation without representation.
By the time of the next federal election in 1993, the Bloc Québécois under Lucien Bouchard was very well prepared to go to the people. It won 54 seats to sweep Quebec and become the official opposition in Parliament. It was a triumph for Bouchard and for the separatist cause. He could fight for Quebec's sovereignty from the floor of the House of Commons.
Merci à vous tous.
But it turned out that Bouchard's battles would be much greater than political ones. He also found himself fighting for his life. In December of 1994, the papers were full of the heart-stopping news. Lucien Bouchard had the deadly flesh-eating bacteria.
He's not out of the wood, but nearly out of the woods.
Bouchard's ordeal developed with shocking speed. He had complained of a pain in his leg, but no one could have known then what was about to happen. Pus was forming in muscle tissue that was being destroyed by the so-called flesh-eating bacteria. Doctors told him his leg would have to come off.
He seemed stunned for a few seconds, and after that, him and his wife mentioned to me that his life was more important than his leg.
Bouchard was well enough to write this note: "Please carry on. Thank you." Doctors said Bouchard was very lucky. So Bouchard recovered from his life-threatening illness, and he remained in politics. In fact, his most influential days were ahead of him, days that would see him push Canada to the brink of breakup. The referendum of 1995, when Canada came within a percentage point of seeing Quebec leave. During the campaign, Bouchard had injected excitement and momentum into the separatist cause, excitement that culminated in the early results on referendum night.
The first results had the same effect as the campaign, a hint of hope that maybe this time it would really happen. In eastern Quebec, they were pulling ahead, but as results from elsewhere began pouring in, particularly from Montreal, the gap narrowed to nothing. Then hours of anxiety as it swang back and forth to the final crushing disappointment. Then Lucien Bouchard, the leader who brought passion and almost success to the campaign.
À l'instant même où on croyait la saisir, cela fait mal.
To see it slip away after coming so close, he said, it hurts. But then quickly and on no uncertain terms, he warned Canada the fight is not over.
Le non l'emporte, toutefois, le problème canadien reste entier.
The no side may have won, he said, but the problem of Canada remains. Ottawa may think it now has an open field, but it is mistaken. And his last word.
Gardons l'espoir, car la prochaine fois sera la bonne.
Keep hope, he said, that the next time will be the right time.
Merci.
And then the Premier. If anyone expected healing words after such a divisive campaign, they didn't get it.
Mes amis.
Jacques Parizeau took aim right away at Quebec's minorities, who voted massively to stay in Canada.
L'argent puis des votes ethniques, essentiellement.
We were beaten, he said, by money and the ethnic vote. 60% of French-speaking Quebecers voted for sovereignty, he said, and the next time they'll get their country. And then, like Bouchard, his warning too.
Va s'y retarder un peu. Pas longtemps. Pas longtemps.
For so long we've wanted a country, he said. It's delayed a bit, but not by much.
Vive le Québec!
Bouchard came out of that loss with one reason to be optimistic. His own personal popularity was enormous in Quebec. But the sentiments of Jacques Parizeau forced him to resign as Premier of Quebec. Most people believed his job was Bouchard's for the asking. Not long after, Bouchard did ask, and he got it. But he found some unexpected difficulties in his new role, the problems of striking a balance between good government for Quebec with the drive for sovereignty. He frequently ran up against Parti Québécois hardliners over key issues for the sovereignty movement, such as defending the French language. At a convention in 1996, party members questioned his commitment to sovereignty and gave him a lower approval rating than was expected. They changed their minds after he threatened to quit. While Bouchard worked hard to manage the province's affairs, dealing with matters such as a healthcare crisis, his policies involving separation were openly questioned. Be patient, he told separatists as he campaigned in the provincial election of 1998. He said he would only try again to win sovereignty in another referendum if he created what he called winning conditions. But Bouchard did not come out of the election with those winning conditions. He formed another majority provincial government for the Parti Québécois by winning the most seats. But the party got fewer votes overall than the provincial Liberals under Jean Charest. Bouchard knew that meant he would have to spend even more time convincing Quebecers that sovereignty was their destiny. And 2 years into his mandate, he seemed to be laying the groundwork for it. But late in 2000, there was strife within the Parti Québécois. Yves Michaud, a popular longtime party member, made comments that reminded many of Jacques Parizeau's blaming the ethnic vote for the defeat in the referendum. Michaud criticized Jews and immigrants in Quebec for not understanding sovereignty. He suggested Jews thought they were the only ones to have suffered in history. He was unapologetic.
Apologize for what? To be a Quebecer?
Qu'est-ce qu'on veut dire dans le monde?
Bouchard criticized Michaud loudly, leading the condemnation of his remarks in the Quebec legislature. But Bouchard himself came under heavy criticism from within the Parti Québécois for being too severe. He was clearly surprised and frustrated by the reaction. And then it happened.
It is now time for my involvement in politics to come to an end. I will leave my duties as Prime Minister of Quebec and as MNA for Jonquière.
It was as stunning as it was unexpected. Bouchard remains popular in Quebec. Party members believed with him as leader, they would be unbeatable. Ironically, he had to tell them his quitting is partly their fault.
Que je n'ai pas le goût de poursuivre quelque discussion que ce soit.
I do not have the appetite, he said, to have any more discussion on the Holocaust and on the ethnic vote. Every PQ member in the room understood it was a jab at them.
Assimiler ou être assimilé.
It goes back to last November when Yves Michaud, a popular hardcore sovereignist, made comments that Quebec's Jews found offensive. Immediately, Bouchard demanded a retraction. Michaud refused, and he had plenty of PQ sympathizers critical of their leader.
On pardonnera peut-être un acteur politique.
When people refer to my reaction as being mean and petty, Bouchard said, perhaps I can be excused for taking it personally. Over the years as leader, Bouchard learned some tough lessons in the PQ, that internal divisions are often part of the leader's lot. But it's clear in his case, they were beginning to grind him down, and he also felt that in some ways, he was a failure.
I recognize
that my efforts to relaunch the sovereignty debate, he said, were in vain.
J'assume toute la part de responsabilité qui m'échoit.
I assume the responsibility for this failure, he said, and arrive at the necessary conclusion. So a leader is going. A party begins looking for the next. And for the moment, it does not sound enthusiastic.
Today, it's a sad day for us, certainly, because I think we really have a good chief. So it's hard to understand why he has to go.
I really think he's a great man, a great leader, and so it's a hard day.
Among the possible successors, Ministers Bernard Landry and Pauline Marois, who've been around a long time, and the Education Minister, François Legault, who's a relative newcomer. But Péquists and their adversaries acknowledge the man who is leaving is one of the most charismatic politicians in the country. If he failed, can anyone else expect to succeed?
Though he was very effective, and it's difficult to anticipate that there would be someone who could be as effective as he could be, there will be another leader, and the sovereignty movement has not disappeared.
But who will be its new promoter? Bouchard's resignation seemed to be submitted and accepted reluctantly. But then his final words today, and perhaps the most telling reason to explain why he did it.
Les années nous sont comptées et j'ai une jeune famille, d'autant plus précieuse qu'elle m'est venue sur le tard. Audrey a donné plus que je ne pourrai jamais lui rendre. Je veux aussi vivre pleinement cette aventure merveilleuse de l'éducation de garçons de 11 ans et de 9 ans. Alexandre et Simon ont besoin de moi, et moi j'ai besoin de les retrouver tous, et de leur consacrer désormais le meilleur de mes énergies et de mon temps. Merci.
A shocking and desperate cry for help could be heard clear across Canada in November of 2000. The chief of the Innu of Labrador pleading with the government of Newfoundland to remove the children from Sheshashi, a community near Goose Bay in central Labrador. More than 30 children there were openly sniffing gas and getting high on the toxic fumes. They were in urgent need of treatment, the chief said, but both their parents and their community were in no position to help. And so his unusual request to take the children away. A team of social workers was sent in to investigate. The CBC's Natalie Clancy reports.
They were sniffing gas again today, this time out in the open, playing to the cameras. Just steps away, inside, social workers are trying to figure out what to do, assessing 39 children under the age of 16. Children Innu leaders say need to be taken away from their homes and treated for addiction. What? Some of the children are as young as 6. Their faces show an age beyond their years. But what to do? The province says it can't be solved overnight.
If we had just gone in and yanked those children out of there yesterday without anybody saying anything, I think, the issue wouldn't be what are we trying to do for the kids, is what are we doing against the people who we feel can't handle these kinds of issues themselves.
But this expert on child welfare says when children this young are breathing a flammable substance that causes brain damage, so close to open flames, and they're living in the woods, the answer is simple. Act first, assess later.
Here we have children, obviously at risk. You have a community saying, take our children, please help us. And what are we saying? We've got to spend a few days, we've got to fly in extra social workers, we've got to spend a few days doing individual assessments. When really we should be saying the first task is, where would be a safe place for children?
The short term right now is for social service to take these kids off the streets. The long-term solution would be the planning and the programming of a family treatment program.
They're thinking of taking you all into foster homes. What do you think of all of that? And while a solution to the immediate crisis can't come soon enough, people here know it's going to take much longer to get to the heart of why so many children would rather be in the cold, wet woods sniffing gas than at home with their families.
I want to stop sniffing gas.
That's what she says away from the others. But when they're all together, they sniff until they pass out. But at least they're in this new shelter instead of the woods. They seem oblivious to the fact that down the street, social workers are meeting to decide their fate. Why do you sniff gas?
Because they're always drunken.
Carl Rich says he's out here because it's better than home. He hasn't seen his parents in weeks. He's 11.
I don't miss it. My bed is ugly.
This is Carl's house. 6 people share his bed. His mother, Lausanne's already lost one son to the gas. 7 months ago, he caught fire while sniffing and died. He was 11 then, too. But through a translator, she says taking the children away isn't right.
There
must be a solution out there somewhere, but chief has no right to come and take kids away without consulting the parents first.
But Innu Chief Paul Rich says this isn't about blame.
Parents won't admit, or they're ashamed, or they're embarrassed to reveal their problems. But we're not here to embarrass anybody.
Rich says he called in social workers because taking these kids away is the only way to help them.
As authorities debated what best to do, the CBC's Natalie Clancy continued to spend time among the children of Sheshashi, getting to know them and their stories.
Nino Angela Rich was born May 29, 1984.
She's 16 years old, and she's a gas sniffer, drawn to the fumes by powerful hallucinations of her dead little brother.
I
wish I could stop. I can't stop gas sniffing because when I gas sniff, I see my brother who had died from fire.
It was just 7 months ago. Her 11-year-old brother lost to the deadly mix of intoxicating gas and careless child's play. Charles was playing with a candle. He was also sniffing. His brothers Philip and Carl watched helplessly.
I saw him go up in flames, and I saw his whole body go up in flames. I saw his face getting burnt.
At
one point, Charles ran towards me when he was in flames because I too was sniffing gas and the fumes were very strong on me. I ran away because I was afraid I too would be caught on fire.
Their uncle, Louis Rich, wrote this song for Charles' funeral, a song about a child, a family, and a community plagued by decades of alcoholism, despair, and death. The children are haunted by what they saw. They say Charles talks to them in their dreams.
One time in my dream, I dreamed we were in the graveyard, and he was telling me to go to the dark end of the graveyard. At this point, I woke up sweating. Charles get me to stop. I won't stop because it's the only way I can communicate with Charles.
I don't think I want to stop gas sniffing because I want the same thing that happened to me, like what had happened to my brother. Just like the way my brother died is the way I want to die.
So how, Canadians ask themselves, did it come to this? The sad answer is that it's been like this for decades. The Inu's anguish has echoed across this country many times before, with tales of crushing poverty and sky-high suicide rates, of troubles that so often turn to tragedy. And it happened again just a week after this latest cry for help. Innu leaders in Davis Inlet wanted to have at least 80 of their children sent away for treatment. The problem again, substance abuse, gas sniffing. It wasn't always like this, though. For thousands of years, the Innu wandered the bush and barren lands of Labrador. Nomads who lived on caribou and fish and sheltered themselves in tents made of animal skins. The land itself was the very foundation of their society. From it sprang their religion, their social and their political customs. They seemed content and self-sufficient. Then, just over 50 years ago, a rapid change when Newfoundland joined Canada. The Innu were encouraged and often forced to give up their wandering ways and establish themselves in permanent settlements. But the Innu were not recognized under the Federal Indian Act, and that meant not only were they made to abandon their traditional form of self-government, they were not even allowed a say over their own education, health, and social services, not even allowed to pass a simple bylaw.
Since 1949, the provincial government of Newfoundland and Labrador has put us under their legislation without consulting with us, without even talking to us. And when that happened, that's when the community went in crisis.
A once proud and independent people, the Innu found their skills and their culture to be worthless in modern-day Canada. They found themselves adrift, bored with little to do and little hope. And so began a cycle of alcohol and substance abuse, of poverty and neglect, one that's lasted more than a generation.
They feel hopeless because there's nothing out there that gives them the incentive to stop drinking. And sometimes when that happens, the parents forget about their kids.
By the early 1990s, most of Labrador's 1,800 Innu lived in either Davis Inlet or Sheshatshiu. Around that time, two events occurred, one after the other, that catapulted the plight of the Innu to world attention. In 1992, 6 children were killed in a house fire while their parents were out drinking. Less than a year later, the world was stunned again by these images. 6 teens in a freezing shed, high on gas, screaming that they wanted to kill themselves. Canada was accused of driving the Innu to suicide. A human rights group produced a study that found the Innu suicide rate was the highest in the world. Throughout it all, as the Innu waged their personal battles, they waged many others on the political front, struggling against business and government. They pressed for settlement of their land claims and for protection from forestry, mines, and hydroelectric dams. They even took on NATO for conducting low-level military flights over Innu hunting grounds. So what then are the solutions? Clearly there are no easy answers, but there are attempts. The gas-sniffing children, for instance, were removed from their communities and sent to various treatment centers and foster homes. Others were sent to live with elders in the bush, an Innu tradition. As Natalie Clancy reports, for those children, it was a whole new way of life.
There's bannock on the stove and elders keeping watch. No gas, no booze, just camp life, a traditional way of life for some Innu families. But this camp is also a makeshift detox center. It's one of the places the children of Sheshatshiu were sent to fight their addiction. Chief Paul Rich says it's just what Angela Rich and Tiffany Panashaway need.
When the kids get up, they have to make fire and they have to eat in the morning, early in the morning before they go. They have to be clothed well so that they don't get cold.
There's a routine here. Wood to be chopped, chores to be done. A stability these children aren't used to. And it appears to be working. The girls tell their chief they like it here.
They don't even think about gas. Yeah, I was asking her a question of did she like the program and did she like being looked after, and yes, she said she likes that.
Sebastian Nuna runs this camp, but says he's also a substitute dad.
I think they need care and love and be respected, I think, in their home. And I would like to see the parents, I think, be sober up more.
Sheshatshiu's family doctor says it is that simple.
It's not about fancy treatment programs out in the country that cost thousands of dollars to fly people to, or treatment programs out and away. This is about parents, individual parents, people, just plain people, moms and dads, deciding to be with their children.
Returning to their roots, the Innu argue, is their only chance of getting back their sense of purpose. There's now a deal with the federal government in place recognizing the Innu under the Indian Act, and that means more self-government and more say over their own affairs. Governor General Adrienne Clarkson, meanwhile, has taken up the Innu cause. She now serves as honorary patron for a foundation that will try to build recreation centers for Innu children.
People will say, well, this is really a very little thing to do because it's only a community center and you only touch a part of those children's lives. But the little things matter, and I really believe that lighting a candle is better than cursing the darkness.
Perhaps the most radical attempt at change involves the people of Davis Inlet. They live in appalling conditions with no running water, no toilets, just scenes reminiscent of a very poor country. The federal government has agreed to relocate the entire community to a brand new village 15 kilometers away. And construction is behind schedule. So, once again, the Innu must wait, with no guarantees their future will be any brighter. Our next story deals with some of the most fundamental rights in a democracy: the right to free speech, the right to exchange ideas freely, the right to fair and equal treatment. It also deals with an important government right, the right to protect its citizens, in this case from obscene and hateful material. There are times, however, when these rights collide. What may be an example of obscenity for one person may be perfectly acceptable for another. Who decides who is right and how that decision is made? That's what this is about. It's the story of a fight between a bookstore and Canada Customs, a fight that's been called Little Sisters versus Big Brother. Here's Carol Off to set the stage.
It's a multi-million-dollar business in North America. Books, magazines, and movies designed to titillate and gratify. Most pornography comes into Canada over the border with the United States. Most of it is perfectly legal. But when sex is linked with violence, when it's degrading, or when it involves children, Canadian law draws the line. That's considered obscene, and Canada Customs doesn't let it cross the border. That may seem like a simple distinction, except the people who run this bookstore say they're getting burned by Canada Customs. Little Sisters Book and Art Emporium caters to the Vancouver community of gays and lesbians. It stocks soft porn, gay novels, AIDS health books, magazines, and videos, but it's mostly the printed word here. Little Sisters has been having small skirmishes with Customs for years, but now it's a full-scale battle in the Supreme Court of British Columbia. Manager Janine Fuller has taken Customs to court before. The last and most infuriating time was when bureaucrats seized a box of magazines.
They were ordered to return the magazines, and the judge asked them to return them to us promptly, but they were unable to do so because they had burnt every single copy. I think that sent a tremendous message to the owners of the bookstore, that this was the way Canada Customs viewed gay and lesbian material. And this was the kind of respect that our images were going to be shown by them.
Janine Fuller has worked in a lot of different bookstores in the past, but after 4 years at Little Sisters, she's convinced it's being singled out. Too many boxes of books go missing, get held up for months, or banned and then destroyed by customs officers. Many of the same books freely pass over the border when destined for other shops. Gay and lesbian bookstores across Canada are targeted, says Fuller. She believes customs bureaucrats are biased against the lifestyle she lives.
We live in a society that is chronically homophobic. The daily realities of this store don't just involve people coming in with the joy of finding out that they are gay, but they also deal in the realities of someone coming in today with 47 stitches across their face from being beaten. Those are the realities of our community.
But Little Sisters is not alone in its suit. A cadre of writers, publishers, and human rights groups from both sides of the border has given it support, claiming this isn't a matter of simple gay bashing, but of civil rights as laid out in the Canadian Constitution. The British Columbia Civil Liberties Association is a partner. President is Andrew Wilkinson.
The reason we got into this case was that we saw arbitrary, capricious government action. We saw a segment of the community, the gay and lesbian community, being told that they weren't allowed to read about themselves. And who was deciding that? We didn't know, and the feds wouldn't tell us. Customs was stopping things at the border and saying, you're not allowed to read that. And we thought that was wrong.
So what do you hope to accomplish then from this case?
Well, the goal is to stop Customs from doing what we call prior restraint. It's a commonly used term in the business, which means that before something comes into Canada to be assessed on Canada's obscenity laws, Customs is going to decide what they think is right. They will be the judge and jury, and the rest of us will be protected by their wisdom. And we don't want their wisdom, thank you very much.
What's at issue here is the way Canada Customs does its business. The charges are that it stops books coming through one port, allows the same ones through another, that it seizes a vast range of material from children's classics to cookbooks, and it refuses to explain how it does its business. Canada Customs may be catching a lot of pornography, says Little Sisters, but is sweeping up too much in its net, that which is perfectly legal. It's this apparent targeting of some stores that's got one of Vancouver's most respected booksellers involved in the case. Duthie Books has been a family business since the 1950s. Owner Celia Duthie wanted to know if charges against Customs were true. She ordered the same books from the same distributor as Little Sisters.
We ordered up a number of books, about a dozen titles, from Allison Press in the United States. And they were shipped in exactly the same way Little Sisters has their books shipped in. And we went out and picked them up. They had looked at them, and they let them go through.
And what had happened to these books when they had the destination of Little Sisters on them?
They had been seized.
This woman sees things differently. Laurie Geske is president of Real Women's British Columbia chapter. She wants her family and community protected from the huge pornography industry. She doesn't think the interests of gays and lesbians should interfere with that.
They make lots of efforts to portray themselves as victims. They are actually very powerful, considering they represent only 1 to 3% of the population. And I say good for Customs. They should be stopping things at the border and making sure that it's going to be okay.
Geske is aware that books do get detained that shouldn't be. Ironically, she's had material held up at Customs, then later released. Material destined for the Creation Science Association of Canada. But she says such inconveniences are a small price to pay.
It's a sacrifice that families are willing to make in order to keep the family intact and to protect our children.
Ottawa is central control for Canada Customs. Books, magazines, and movies that have been seized are sent to this building, where 10 bureaucrats who cannot be named, whose backgrounds and qualifications cannot be released, pore over the material, looking for what might be obscene or what might be hate literature. No one will explain how they make a decision or what the process is. The government admits it has no idea how much obscene literature this customs office prevents coming into the country. There's apparently no way to measure it. And it can't say for sure just what would happen if Customs was no longer able to seize books at the border. But Ottawa insists this is its first and best defense in the war against pornography. The minister in charge of Customs, John Anderson, is convinced Customs is doing its work and not singling out gays.
It appears from what I have been given, the information that I've been given, that in fact there is no targeting of the gay and lesbian community or their bookstores, and that it is in fact simply related to obscenity, pure and simple, regardless of whether it's homosexual obscenity or heterosexual obscenity.
Anderson is also listening to the concerns of people who want to stem the flood of pornography ready to pour over our borders.
We would also have some very, very unhappy people who are concerned about violence against women, people who are concerned about hate literature, and people who are concerned about kiddie porn. I feel if this law were struck down, such people would consider themselves betrayed by the Parliament of Canada.
Historically, whenever we've tried to do the kind of regulation that's occurring at Canada Customs, it doesn't work. It is more marginalized groups who are always affected by those regulations, and it's often not the groups in any way, shape, or form that have been targeted to be the ones that we're most concerned about. And I don't think necessarily removing magazines from a rack are going to have the kinds of effects that we need to have happen to protect women and children in this country.
Little Sisters has raised more than $100,000 for this case and would be hard put to find much more. But Ottawa has deep pockets and a need to appear it's being tough on pornography. Whatever happens, there's a lot at stake in this big case about a little bookstore.
There is another aspect to this story which is important to explain. The question of onus. That means burden or duty. And in this story, there was a dispute over which side should have the burden of proof, which side should have to prove the books and magazines were obscene. Usually, the prosecution has to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that the accused did something wrong. But in this case, the onus was reversed. Little Sisters had to prove that the material was not obscene. Some people didn't think that was fair. It took years for the case to wind its way through the courts in British Columbia. In 1996, the province's Supreme Court ruled that Canada Customs was not acting illegally. Little Sisters appealed the ruling, and that threw the whole matter into the lap of Canada's Supreme Court. And Janine Fuller and John Dixon were there in March 2000 for the hearing. Their lawyer argued that customs officers should not be censors.
We would like to put the customs officers out of business when it comes to books and films and videos.
The High Court's verdict was handed down in December. Here's Christina LeBond with a report on the decision.
16 years, hundreds of thousands in legal fees, and for Little Sisters Bookstore, victory at last.
We celebrate the fact that books will come into this country without the kind of inability and unscrutinized tyranny that has happened at the border through Canada Customs.
The Supreme Court ruling writes the closing chapter of a long judicial saga for the gay and lesbian bookstore. A saga that begins in 1984 with a gay rights magazine called The Advocate. Little Sisters tried to import it from the United States, but Canada Customs judged it obscene, burning all copies at the border. Since then, customs agents have detained or destroyed thousands more books headed to the gay and lesbian bookstore. Books mainstream bookstores could often import hassle-free. Little Sisters called that discrimination. In today's ruling, Canada's highest court agreed. The customs treatment was high-handed and dismissive of the appellant's right to receive lawful and expressive material, which they had every right to import, it writes.
We feel enormously vindicated.
There is some vindication for Canada Customs as well. The court ruled it still has the right to censor.
The Supreme Court has ruled that it still wants Customs, Canada Customs and Revenue Agency, to continue to detain obscene material at the border.
Only now, Canada Customs has to prove the material is offensive. Before this judgment, the bookstore had to prove it wasn't.
From now on, it will be almost impossible for Canada to establish in a court of law that a book, that text is obscene. That is an enormous ratchet forward for the expression rights in Canada.
But the ruling still falls short for some gay and lesbian activists.
We had hoped the courts would tell Canadians that the state has no place on the bookshelves of Canadians, particularly gay and lesbian Canadians. Unfortunately, the court didn't go that far as to strike down the law we think is the problem.
They say the problem is Canada's obscenity law. Advocates argue it's out of date and simply not relevant in today's information age. Not when, with the click of a mouse, Canadians can access explicit material, far more explicit than what you might find in a bookstore, from the comfort of their own homes.
For years, one of Newfoundland's biggest exports has been its people, men and women forced to leave the province to find work. But that has begun to change. St. John's is jumping with jobs. The province's economy is hot, so hot in fact that in 2001 some analysts say it will lead the country in growth. So what's behind the boom and who stands to benefit the most? Here's Dan Bjarnason with the story of the new Newfoundland.
Weather and geography have always conspired against Newfoundland. Isolation here on the edge of the chilling North Atlantic has robbed its people of prosperity, driving them over the years in their tens of thousands into exile. Charlie McCarthy and Joy Greenland are typical of generations of Newfoundlanders, part of a diaspora forced to build their futures away from their island. Like so many Newfoundlanders, that future has spelled Toronto.
The fake moose?
Yeah, the fake golden moose, and then you gotta get ready for the real one.
But Joy and Charlie see a new Newfoundland in the making, and they want to be in on it. They're going home.
Nope.
Joy and Charlie left Newfoundland as in effect economic refugees. Now, as they're able to become part of the new economy, it's time for farewells.
Here's to going home. Is that what we toast to? Here's to Newfoundland. To Charlie. And Charlie.
For these Newfoundlanders in limbo, Toronto never really became home.
Oh, it's good, eh?
Mm-hmm, it's very yummy.
For Charlie's fellow Newfoundlanders who are staying on as Torontonians, there's a whiff of envy in the air.
For you guys and for me, there's nowhere else like home.
No, that's true. Absolutely.
Charlie's career as a computer programmer set him on a career odyssey that took him first to Nova Scotia, then to New Brunswick, then to South Carolina, and finally to Toronto. He saw no future in Newfoundland.
Obviously, I made the decision to go, so it was a decision knowing that I could end up living in another part of Canada or another part of North America, for that matter.
Joy's trained to be a doctor. It broke her heart to move away to continue her studies.
My plan right from the first day I started med school was to get the training I needed to go back to Newfoundland so I could work back home.
I talked to a lot of friends in Newfoundland during a visit last summer, and the indication was that opportunities were there and were picking up and continuing to pop up everywhere. So it just made me more determined, knowing we both wanted to be there to pursue an opportunity. We've made plans to commute back and forth in the short time we'll be apart. In a perfect world, we'd both be going at the same time, but it's a great opportunity for me. Is the right time.
It's a new Newfoundland story of reunions of family and of exile. Charlie steps off the plane this Sunday night. Tomorrow morning, he steps into his new computing job.
I'm not letting you hug me.
The hopes for a new Newfoundland are for the moment based almost entirely on the new economic energy of St. John's, where unemployment has fallen to 10%, which by Newfoundland standards is something of a boom. The noise of construction mixes in with the smell of money and investment and optimism. Looking out on all this from Signal Hill at Harbour's entrance is Zedcom, a startup computer programming outfit, typical of the new enterprises where the new mood is being minted. Zedcom's one of those little companies that could. Started by Imad Riskala with a few university friends, it now employs 45 high-tech employees with contracts signed and offices opened in Toronto and New York and Los Angeles. Not bad for a company that by normal standards of international business patterns is in the middle of nowhere. All it took, aside from the wiring and circuit boards and electronic know-how, was for someone to see that in this age of the new media, where your business actually is scarcely matters.
The major competitive advantages that have cursed this place for years have to do with geography and distance and isolation. When you're dealing with the wired world and information technology and other kinds of technologies, distance is dead. It's no longer an issue.
Also gone here at Zedcom are traditional corporate attitudes. Pool tables and massages are offered to its staff not as perks, but as run-of-the-mill job benefits. It's part of the Zedcom attitude used to lure Newfoundlanders back here to the Rock.
When you're looking for specialized experience, Newfoundlanders are all over the world. A lot of them want to come home. I mean, that's the good news. We've brought back about 8 in the last couple of years, and we hope to, as we really are planning to grow quite a bit in the next couple of years, we're going to be bringing back a lot more Newfoundlanders, and we're really excited about it.
This spirit of back to Newfoundland has meant, for the first time in decades, that the island's population has actually grown. Here on the outskirts of St. John's in this shopping plaza, there used to be a department store. Well, it closed. Then a new company set up, creating hundreds of new jobs, retailing to the world on the internet. This electronic workplace has created new jobs where none existed before, and has created a new industry that is a vision of the hip, with-it economic future. Sean Carberry moved back from Welland, Ontario for a managerial job here.
Once we're up to full speed, we're expected to be probably the second largest employer in the area itself.
Why would you set up here in Newfoundland? What are the attractions to move here?
We have a vast labor pool that's rather educated today. And of course the Canadian dollar, it's pretty attractive for a United States-based company. And the technology is here.
With salaries well above Newfoundland's minimum wage, the Converge's experience translates into an employment bonanza for a province traditionally plagued by rock-bottom salaries and very few jobs.
If this job hadn't come along for you, what would have happened to you?
Moved away, for sure.
Away from Newfoundland?
Mm-hmm. No choice.
No choice?
No choice.
How come? What do you mean, no choice?
In the last 3 years, I've had 22 weeks of work, and I've done an IT program, and I'm also a certified Nobel administrator. And I'm still out of work until I found this position here.
And you? What would be your fate today if you weren't here?
Like everybody else, will be out looking for work, or the possibility is leaving the province.
The other face of St. John's new prosperity is just up the coast at Bull Arm, where they're building this massive ship the length of 3 football fields to process oil pumped out of the sea. Jobs created here have an irresistible pull to families eager to return home. More than 1,000 skilled tradespeople work on building this oil production ship. It's scheduled for launching next spring, when Newfoundland's second offshore oil field comes online. For Kevin Noseworthy, this new oil industry has meant tickets home for his family.
Well, it's a good phenomenon, I guess, really. You know, that's what we all want to do, get back home and excel at the trades that we've chosen or the jobs that we've chosen to do. We like to do things in Newfoundland, obviously, where our families are, and grow with that.
Brian Gray came home after years of working in the oil business all over the world.
To be honest, if there hadn't been any opportunities, I probably would have been pursuing my career in Australia, yeah.
But there's a limit to the economic lift that can come out of offshore oil. Construction may be a boost to the construction crews here, but the oil itself will not be refined in Newfoundland. A Stonehenge of a symbol of a lost opportunity is only a short way down the highway at Come By Chance, where a government-built 60s-era refinery is too old and too small to serve the new industry. The need to create sustainable oil jobs lurks in the minds of the crews here at Bull Arm.
Well, the future has been better lately than it has been in the 70s and 80s, obviously, but we need to develop a lot more yet to get to a point where we can call it an industry.
Newfoundland's historic dilemma, aside from its isolation, is how to create a diversified economy, one that would last and not be so shackled to its limited resources. Fish and forests have propelled the Newfoundland economy for ages, and it has never been enough. Reminders of the inadequate traditional economic base are everywhere. There are, as yet, no monuments to the promise of oil and computers. There's no doubt the computer revolution makes for a strange catch in a province where the economy is traditionally based on the sea. But even the established captains of industry are impressed by the promise of the new economic culture.
We should look at the larger picture and put all...
Vic Young is president of Fisheries Products International, the largest fish processor and retailer on the continent. A no-nonsense realist, Young says Newfoundland's financial upswing is not just an economic burp.
Both information technology, high-tech, oil and gas, they're here and they're sustainable in the long term.
The trick is, says Young, to get depressed rural Newfoundland on board the St. John's economic train.
You often hear the expression, the rock is on a roll. Well, in my view, St. John's is on a roll. All of the rest of Newfoundland is quite another thing. We are still fiscally disparaged. As a Canadian province, we still have the highest per capita debt, the lowest per capita income, the highest unemployment rate, the largest rate of outmigration, the lowest credit rating.
There clearly is action in Newfoundland's economic mix, but the key message is to cash in on the opportunities. Nothing beats a solid education with practical, sellable skills.
A rising tide raises all boats, and even people who
who don't have some of the education credentials will end up in some positions that just come with the growth. But certainly the wave of opportunity is right now given to those with the right educational background.
The trip back to find the gold in Newfoundland's rainbow has been an elusive hunt for some. Ken Clancy found work in Ontario, then heard of the new action back home and came back. That was months ago. We found him at a job center. Where, he asks, are the jobs for me?
I'm down here Monday to Friday at the job bank. I try the internet, I try the newspaper, I even try on weekends, walking around on weekends to find employment. I mean, there's only so much one person can do on his own. I mean, there's got to be some jobs out there.
Ken now wonders, as he surfs the internet, if he made the wrong move by moving home.
New jobs received since November the 24th, 2000. 43 jobs in the Barrie surrounding area where I just came back from Barrie. Now I'm back in Newfoundland and there's only one job here for me.
What's the lesson?
The lesson to be learned here is basically don't even bother to try to find work down here. Your best bet is just pack up your stuff and leave.
Should there be a caution sent to those Newfoundlanders that are living on the mainland?
Well, you can caution Newfoundlanders who are living on the mainland all you want. They all want to come back to the greatest place in the world.
Remember Charlie McCarthy? He went to his first day on the job with a spring in his step, back at last to that greatest place on earth.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Charlie, do you want to just come out this way and we'll get started on your orientation?
Sure. For The National, I'm Dan B. Arneson in St. John's.
And that's all for News in Review. I'm Knowlton Nash. See you next time.